Ooh, what's up, WonderCon? How you guys doing? Make some noise. I wasn't expecting that. Such a good welcome this early, and I say as it's 2 p.m., 1 p.m. Anyway, what's up, WonderCon? I'm so excited to be here today to talk to this amazing group of panelists to get all the details about their work. So we're gonna jump right in. My first question is for Carlos. Carlos, how are you?
Very good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Each Star Trek short explores a unique story within the Star Trek universe. How do you ensure that each short both honored the established characters and contributed to their development in new ways?
Well, I didn't grow up on a Star Trek. I grew up on a Star Wars. So
Same.
now I love both. But where I grew up with in Spain, there wasn't that much Star Trek. So it wasn't until I started doing these Star Trek shorts that I became familiar through the people that I was working for. They were the ones that were telling me about, kind of like how it all started. So the first piece that the first short that I directed for them had to do with a character from the pilot that was rejected in 1965, The Cage. So slowly I started understanding more about, I knew kind of like what you see in mainstream media, which is like who Kirk and Spock are, that there is an enterprise and things like that. But I didn't know much more after that. So it's really the writer and then people in the crew that were really helpful in helping me understand all the dynamics about the characters, as well as the messages, really, of Star Trek.
Yeah. So you're just really good at your job.
I try.
I love it. If you've noticed, there are not one, not two, but three Chris's on this panel today. My next question is for the other Chris that spells their name with an H. So Chris, considering Heretic's focus on the contrast between outward appearances and inner darkness, how did the makeup and effects team collaborate with the costume and other departments to ensure a cohesive and impactful visual representation of that theme?
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Chris.
Great.
Other Chris.
Other Chris? I'm the other Chris. That's a great question. On Heretic, one of my favorite characters we created was the prophets. The biggest challenge with that was taking these beautiful women and in real life and making them look broken down and emaciated and tortured. And we did a lot of makeup tests and worked with the directors to really, hone in on that vision. It's only when we really got to set that the real collaboration on costume and hair, it tied everything up.
Right.
So collaboration's vastly important in the process. But me being responsible for the prosthetics and really crafting something that worked with the character and the director's vision, that's hugely important.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a lot of follow-up questions on that.
Okay.
But I know they're in my script, so I'm gonna try not to go too off script. My next question is for the third Chris, if you will, without an H, for those keeping track. Chris, given the Uglies' emphasis on the manipulation of appearances, how do you use costume to visually communicate the underlying deception and the contrast between outward beauty and the inner truth?
That's a great question.
Thank you. It's written my script just that way.
So it's an interesting movie because even though it's for young teenagers, it has like deep, a lot of depth into it. And we started with the Uglies uniforms. The manipulation starts with the Uglies uniforms, where they're identical, and that's intentionally to strip them out of their individuality. And then with the Pretties, they're perfect, but it's this artificial perfection. Their sculptural costumes are almost uncomfortable, and that's to show the exact truth within them of how them craving that external validation is disconnecting them with themselves. And I think that's the whole point of the movie. It's just that the more you disconnect people from themselves, the more society can manipulate you.
That was profoundly deep. Whoa, I'm shook. Okay, well, we're out of the Chris tunnel now. I'm moving on to Desiree. Desiree, Thelma features June Squibb in a very physical and determined role. How did the makeup design contribute to portraying her character's age and vulnerability while also showcasing her strength and resolve throughout her journey?
Oh my goodness. Okay, first, June is just like a force of nature to begin with. Like, she's incredible. And she was 93 when we shot the movie.
An icon.
Yeah, and I love it because she likes to say she did all her own stunts, which she basically did, except for one, which was totally incredible. So June, to begin with, is awesome. So knowing that she was 93, and when I read the script, there was a lot of familiarity to her day that I kind of really wanted to play into. So there's like a lovely montage where she's doing a bunch of stuff. And to me, I was like, I know this lady. I know this lady who gets up every day. She does the same thing. She does all of her things. And I really wanted to kind of bring that into her look, but also keep it really simple and make sure that she looked really pretty doing it.
Right.
And knowing that it's mostly one script day, so she's going to be in this look for quite a bit. So, I thought about it quite a lot actually because of that, and I wanted to make sure that it made sense with her day, you know.
Right.
And so she's really simple, but she's really pretty. She has a basic routine that keeps her through the whole movie that also makes sense with who she is. And
Right.
yeah, I loved that.
I want to meet her. She sounds so cool.
Oh my gosh, she's amazing. I love her.
I love it. All right, so Michael, Agatha All Along, which selfishly is one of my favorite things that have come out recently, delves into Agatha's backstory and her magical abilities. How did the music contribute to establishing the atmosphere of her world, and how did it reflect her and her coven's journey to reclaim their unique powers?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about Agatha is, from WandaVision, she's a villain. She's mean. She's cruel. She treats everyone terribly, and we don't like her. She's funny, but she's not like a likable character. And that was a discussion that we had really early on. Pivoting from how she transforms in that series and now having this series about herself, where she's the protagonist, but she's still kind of a villain. And so, me and my co-composer, who's also named Chris.
A fourth Chris enters the arena?
We really honed in on that. So we wrote a different theme for this show because we're digging more into the depth of her character.
Right.
And digging into her trauma. And as you come to learn, really all of her motivations comes from this fear and covering up her past trauma with her mom, losing her son, and just being a social outcast. And how that relates with her coven and their journey throughout the show is, finding a sisterhood where they fit in and they're able, to be together and, find redemption and growth and empowerment.
Wow. Michael briefly touched on this, but I also horribly forgot to let anybody in this room know, if you are a fan of any of these things or plan on watching any of these things, you may potentially be entering a spoiler zone. So tread carefully. You handled that answer very, very well, though. Thank you. I was just getting out of the Chris tunnel. I feel like I've been shoved back in, but we're going to move on to Tim. Tim, Watchmen presents a world steeped in alternate history and moral ambiguity. How did the score in chapters 1 and 2 establish the unique atmospheres of this world, and how did it reflect the tension between the characters' pasts and their present circumstances?
So with Watchmen, which is originally a comic book, we could have gone a lot of directions with music, and we wanted to establish a tone, a style, to kind of figure out how we're going to make this world a unique place. And Brandon Vietti, the director, producer, and I had a love for electronic dance music and synthesizers, analog synthesizers. So we'd worked together for about 10 years and been trying to figure out a way to incorporate that as much as we could. And this was the perfect project because it takes place in the 80s, and there was a lot of film scores that came out in that time, that used a lot of synthesizers. The first time that was really starting to happen. So we really chose that as our style. And I had, on my own, kind of gotten into making techno tracks. So I had some technique with production and making these grungy underground warehouse sounds that I was able to kind of infuse on top of the classic 80s synth sounds. So that helped to emphasize the grungy, gritty New York streets of the world of Watchmen. And then another genre we kind of relied on musically was dark ambient music. So that was kind of the way that we were able to address the moral ambiguity was with sonic ambiguity in this ambient kind of dark, murky, doesn't really have melodies. It's kind of just a wash of sound. So those are a couple ways we address those.
I feel like Sonic Ambiguity is going to be the name of our EDM band later.
Yeah.
We'll discuss. I'm going to come back to Carlos. Star Trek is known for its moral and ethical dilemmas. How did you use these dilemmas to push the characters' development and challenge their beliefs or motivations in the shorts?
So, I mean, one of the things I learned with Star Trek was actually how much I enjoy that. Like it puts a lot of questions about, both ethical and moral questions. There is also a great optimism to the original series. But because when I took on the project, there was a huge imposter syndrome on my end.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, not having grown up with Star Trek, I found myself often in directing these shorts where I was like, what am I doing here? Like, I'm not, I didn't grow up with Star Trek. But what I kept telling myself is, well, I want to do a human story first.
Right.
And then I'll do a Star Trek story second. And the way I approached that was basically pulling from personal experiences. Now, I knew that this was a really big, encounter of Kirk and Spock again. Spoilers, and I just kept asking myself, like, if I want people, usually, like, for me, the success of a film or a show or anything really is, it depends on whether I care about the characters or whether I care about the story or whether I get anything really out of it. And in here, basically, I was like, if I want people to love these characters, I have to draw from something in my life that is just as important, if not more. So I drew a lot from my experiences with my parents. Like within the last 5 years, I lost both of them, unfortunately, and then I became a father. So for me, I really wanted people to care about Kirk and Spock on this short just as much as my parents meant to me. So that would, if you watch the short, there is a lot of multiple places, that I just kind of like try to inject things of my own experiences. Because if it's relatable to me, then it'll be relatable to people that maybe are not familiar with Star Trek,
Right.
based on their own experiences.
Right.
And the great thing about the whole thing was that a lot of people, having watched the short, talked to us about their relationship with their parents watching Star Trek.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like a nice blend of both.
Right. That's really special. Thank you for sharing that. Back in the Chris tunnel, to Chris with an H. Prosthetics can add layers of complexity to a character's performance. How do you work with the actors to ensure that the prosthetics contribute to, rather than hinder, their ability to fully express the character's emotional journey?
Wow, that's a really a complex question.
It is.
It is. Every actor is a little different, and every actor reacts differently to prosthetics. I mean, my job is to augment their character. Whether it's something like making them bald, or putting pointed ears on them, or a whole bury them in rubber. I want to facilitate their process, and so with the most comfortable. Comfort's a huge thing. as an actress fighting these prosthetics, it just takes them out of their character, and I'm not doing my job very well. So the processes that I use, materials that I use, it's all with like, how can I help, these actors do their job and make that character successful. And we all know who Ethan Peck is. Strange New Worlds, he's Spock. And it's like, can you imagine, like, oh, I'm gonna go to work and be Spock today, like huge shoes to fill, right?
Right.
And so I have him for an hour and a half. He's in my chair, and Ethan, who's like probably the nicest guy you'll ever meet, and sweetheart, just joking around, and how's your weekend? All that stuff is and then somewhere over the course of an hour and a half, he becomes Vulcan, stoic, logical, and I've put ears and I've adjusted his brows, and at this point he's already had his hair done, so he has his classic Vulcan haircut.
Right.
And so, and it's also a pinch me move. Raymond too. It's like,
great.
oh my God, I can't screw this up. And but it's the first time I did Ethan was way back in Discovery season 2.
Oh.
It's the first time we saw Pike and Spock.
Wow.
They made some cameos, and then on Strange New Worlds, he's every day he's Spock, and so it's a great thing to be able to contribute to that with prosthetics and have that add to their personality and their character.
Right.
And I don't know what else to say about it. It's a process you just have to support, and
Case by case.
Sometimes there's adjustments through the makeups that we have to make that help the actor, not just Ethan, but just actors in general.
Right.
I think even nowadays in movies, people are wanting prosthetics on them. They're kind of embracing. Oh, sure. A different man, like buried in rubber.
Right.
And like well-known actors are getting prosthetics.
I love that.
Yeah. And
I feel like it hasn't always been like that.
I think people have been kind of afraid of failure because if it doesn't work, like it's a lot of time and energy to make these things, like the penguin,
Right.
I mean,
It's because they're not working with you. That's why.
well, thank you very much. But yeah, that was, I mean, highly successful, and to be able to take someone and I think actors are also fighting their famousness, in a
Right.
way.
No, that makes perfect sense.
It's like, oh yeah, that person, I grew up with that person in, of whatever movie, and it's like now they're in a new movie, but it's still in your head. So prosthetics gives you an avenue to kind of take them out of that and give them a new,
Right.
kind of like a fresh start at a new character.
Yeah.
Right. And when it's successful, it's highly successful.
Right.
And so by making it comfortable and lightweight and agile and things like that, that just helps everybody.
I've never heard it explained that way before. I love that. Good stuff. All right. Moving back to Chris without the H. Netflix's Uglies presents a society with a strict aesthetic standard. How did the costumes reflect the distinct stages of ugly versus pretty and beyond? And how did those visual distinctions contribute to the film's exploration of identity and conformity? I feel like we touched on this a little bit, but maybe you can expand a little bit more.
Yeah, and this is an interesting question because it kind of shows all the three different worlds, and kind of touching on what Chris said, the connection to the actor, our main character Tally, played by Joey King, she has to move smoothly through all three worlds and still feel like she belongs. She's like looking for that sense of belonging. So we try to give it a different visual language. So in the Uglies, they're standard, identical. They're trying to strip them out of personality. And then in the Smokies, who are the runaways, they live off the land. And, and they explore, they attach things they find to their costumes. They appreciate everything they have. And through their costumes, you can see the rebellion. And the rebellion is connection with themselves and connection to nature. And in the pretties, they're beautiful and they're perfect, but that luxurious look almost kind of shows that they're conforming to a standard. You know, they seem almost sterile. And then, and I think that's the whole point of the movie, is trying to show how, depending how much you resist or give in to a system, is how you end up looking like and fitting in.
Right. I love the themes of this movie. So deep. Let's see. Desiree, we're going to move back to you. Given that June Squibb is the central figure of Thelma, how did the makeup design work in collaboration with the costume and hair departments to create a cohesive and believable visual representation of her character's personality and experiences?
Well, so in approaching this, I actually wanted to know what everybody's ideas were because I didn't get a test with June because of her schedule.
Oh, she's busy. She's booked and blessed.
It was crazy. So I really needed everybody's input. And one of the things that really kind of like sparked it for me was our costume designer, Amanda Wingy Lee, designed this really beautiful quilted jacket. And then Zoe Worth and Josh Margolins' girlfriend, Zoe was our producer, dyed the jacket this blue, and it was so cool. And when I saw the color, I was like, oh, I am doing a whole color theory thing on her right now. So I wanted the blue to play off the blue in her eyes, and so I actually went with a monochromatic pink look. And I picked hues and textures because the majority of the movie is at night. I wanted everything to resonate the same in daylight and at nighttime. Because again, it's only mostly one script day. So I really found out what this color was and was talking to Amanda about what her color story was for June and how she was going to portray how she's kind of this badass, right? But she's also a grandma, and there's this really beautiful relationship that she has with her grandson in the film, played by Fred. And I wanted the pinks, the softness of the pinks, to kind of just play off of that. And then Denise Baker, who did the hair too, also, we were talking about how we wanted her curls to be soft and not real tight or everything. Sure. Because we did want her vulnerability to play in, but at the same time, she's kicking ass in this movie.
Right.
So,
I love it.
So there was a lot of input, and then when I finally had it down, I had my roadmap planned for her, and when we sat down and I finally did the look on her, I remember she looked, and her assistant Kelly was there, and she said, "Kelly, look at me!" And I was like, "Oh, yes!
You did it! You did the thing! Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it was awesome."
I feel like that was because you had thought about it so much and you had weaved in all of those fine details.
Yeah, I actually loved designing this look. It was simpler, she can hold makeup. I was lucky enough to work with her from Sundance to the movie premiere. Oh, wow. So I got to do all kinds of looks on her, and she can really hold a glamour look. I love it.
I love it.
And she also looked really great with the black eye.
Right.
Yeah. So she can hold a look. But this was a really simple look, and I loved it because it really just brought something to her. And every day when I was done getting her ready, she would look at herself and I could tell she saw Thelma. And I loved that.
That's the best. Huge compliments for you.
Really the best.
Wow, I love that. All right, Michael, in Agatha All Along, Rio is the embodiment of death itself. And we see her true identity hinted at throughout the series. So, how did you create a sonic identity for Rio that hints at her motivations and connections to Agatha?
Yeah, so I think the really fun thing about music is, we're playing the subtext and we're, giving these dimensions or characters that are, more abstract. And I feel like Rio's the perfect embodiment of that.
Right.
Because there's really, her character has such a duality to it that's, I find so fascinating. And, the first part is her relationship with Agatha, and that, there's a tenderness, there's a sincerity, as, she's the crazy ex-girlfriend, they're former lovers, they have a history together. It's very passionate, very fiery, but also heartbroken. Right. So we have that layer of her
But at the same time, she literally is death.
Right.
And she kind of lives, she's not human, like she's this other being that lives in these liminal spaces and was literally like navigating, cutting through the curtain, like going into these other sort of worlds, and has this alien quality to her. And so, you know, we recorded, you know, Tim and I are both clarinet players, and we were just talking about, I recorded myself playing clarinet on it, and, you know, putting that in, and then we put a synthesizer with processing over top of that, and it creates this weird blend of sounds familiar and organic, but it's something's off, something's different,
Right.
and that really becoming like a strong part of her character, and then it sort of blossoms into this big, you know, heavy drum pattern with these like big bassy sounds that are very intense, because she's death, she's this unstoppable force of nature. And just the duality of this tenderness versus this, you know, this intensity, this brutality.
Right.
Again, not wanting to be like, she's not a villain, but she's not evil. She's a natural order of things.
Right.
And there's a finality to it, but it's the way that it is. Like, it's the way it is.
Okay, I'll rewatch the whole series tonight. Fine. Thank you. That was a great answer. Tim, I'm going to jump to you. As we were just discussing, music has the power to influence the audience's perception of characters. So how do you use the score to shape how viewers interpret the motivations and emotional states of the characters, particularly in the more ambiguous and morally gray moments of Watchmen chapters 1 and 2? I think we touched a little bit on this earlier as well.
Yeah. Sonic ambiguity.
Sonic ambiguity.
Yeah, so for, you know, the setting as well as the characters, this is a world of danger and tension, Watchmen, and I mentioned before the dirty, grungy synthesizers that we brought into it also worked well with some of the characters that were violent and dangerous, particularly the Rorschach character. This is a guy who's, you know, driven by moral justice, but his methods to achieve that are not necessarily very nice, and you know, very violent guy. So those grungy synthesizers, and I created kind of like this synth swell that was just more of a sound than a melody or a theme for him that would repeat and grow, and it worked well to go along with his sort of gravelly voice. The Titus Welliver's performance was amazing on this. Another character is kind of central to, if you know Watchmen, is this blue guy, and I won't give anything away, but he transforms and he has a pretty tragic backstory. So there's a lot of flashbacks in the movie that help with character development, and so he's able to start themes in the flashback and develop them in back and forth as we cut back and forth. But in his tragic backstory, I brought in some live orchestra kind of sounds, you know, traditional scoring to blend with the synthesizers, because those sounds we're familiar with them, and they kind of tug at the heartstrings a bit more. But I wanted to keep the contour of the score consistent, so I blended them with the synthesizers and kind of muted the orchestral sounds so that they would match the overall flow of the score. So that was a challenge, but I think it worked well with that Dr. Manhattan backstory.
Right. I found our second name. You said it. Synthswell. Ooh. We're going to workshop these names later.
Sonic ambiguity. I'm going with that.
That's a good one. That's a good one. You can't beat that. Starting on this end, moving down, this is a favorite question of mine. For those just starting out in your respective fields, what advice would you give to creatives looking to make a meaningful impact on character development and storytelling? And this could be something as simple as, this is a class that I took, you should take that class. Or you can speak to a more deeper, anything in between, whatever kind of advice that you guys would have. What do you think? Yeah.
I mean, usually, like, what I tell for people that are trying to get into stuff that has to do with story, character development, film, any of the areas, the amazing thing happening right now is that there's so much out there to study. I mean, I went to college in the late 90s. So back then there was no YouTube, there was no Vimeo, there was none of that stuff. So basically we would, I just remember like we would have all these like VHS tapes. I feel so old, but like it's VHS tapes of like lectures on a story, on character, Disney lectures. Like, my background is in animation. So, like I grew up as an animator at Lucasfilms and then Pixar. So we would share these worn down VHS tapes that almost as if they were drugs. Like, like you would just have like one person on the hallways, like I just found a new one, but you cannot have it.
You guys got those good VHS
just
tapes.
look around like, here, have it just for today. Come back. And now that is so wild now, the amount of information that is out there. So I would say like, just really utilize so much of that. I would say for the story and for character development, study, even study the things that you like and even the things that you don't. Because it's very easy to rip on the things that you don't, but it's a lot harder to analyze why they don't work. So for example, like for characters, don't just study characters in films or TV shows, but also study real people, because usually on films and TV shows, it's kind of like an interpretation of an actor or a director's or a writer's vision of a character, but you get the best stuff with real people, and the same follows with a story, break down your favorite movies, find out like, what makes this one interesting? Why does this one have 3 acts instead of 2 acts, like a Parasite or a Full Metal Jacket? Like, I think asking yourself questions and always being hungry about whatever areas that you want to learn is the best thing that you can do. And it's kind of like a lifelong process.
Right.
I mean, I haven't been an animator for the last 10 years since I transitioned to directing. And to this day, I'm still studying animation. So it feels like, college is forever.
YouTube University forever. I love that. How about you, sir?
Well, I give advice to up and coming artists all the time.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, they call my studio and they want to come in and sweep and learn and shadow, looking for any kind of mentorship. And so it's always a tricky thing giving advice because my life is my life and they're,
of course, yeah.
It's always an access to means and whatnot. I tell people that I'm self-taught. I didn't go to makeup school, couldn't afford it. It was not only not accessible, but also I wasn't able to not just not afford it, but I couldn't get there. It wasn't in my town, right?
Right.
So I'd have to actually take a plane and go. And also, I started out when it was there's no internet. It was just like VHS and Starlog and Fangoria and Gorzo, like these magazines, and I still have them and I still look at them and so I tell people if you want to create a character, you have to practice and find something that you want to do and replicate it. And that's going to tell you right away if you're going the right direction. Character design is always it's a funny thing because on a film, they'll the writers will create a character, and so you're always trying to interpret their vision, right? But when you're starting out, you're creating characters for yourself,
Right.
and replicate, whether you're replicating your heroes or monsters from films. I think just that drive to do it and want to do it. I grew up watching movies and loving movies, and so the people that I talk to that want to do this, budding makeup artists and whatnot. And actually, they are a lot of makeup artists. They're not just like, I want to be a special makeup effects artist. They're actually makeup artists who just want to branch into prosthetics.
Right.
And it's never been more accessible now with the internet.
Right.
And so I kind of I just impart that, if you have the drive and it doesn't take a lot of money, you can sculpt at home, you can replicate the characters that you like and practice that way. That will give you sort of real time results. And then as you move through your career and get sort of more access to kind of more materials, or because makeup effects is a very technical thing.
Right.
It's very technical, right? And we're always worried about edges, and we're worried about, colors and things like that. And so we can like kind of instantly tell if we're on the right track, And so that's why I tell people, don't give up. Keep working at it.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Chris, without the H, what do you got?
To me, I think, it's interesting because I feel like Desiree and I are going to be sort of on the same page in this one and how we approach. But I think the main thing is obviously curiosity and a physical experience to touching what they are saying, and I feel like a lot of you guys are dressed up here. So you already have that physical experience of trying to become a character. I think that a lot of it is one main thing that I feel like every person who's creative needs to know is that creativity evolves. We always think that people that are on top, they are always unbelievable and amazing. And they all it was a stepping stone for each of them to evolve their creativity, their knowledge. And I think it's like Chris said, just ask questions. Like ask, what did this person wear to bed? What did this person wear, on their day off? Because that shows their personality. And I think through clothes, we really should. I think everybody's style, personal style, not a character, a personal style, kind of shows a little bit of where you came from and where you want to be. That's like the whole journey of us trying to be ourselves. And that's kind of like, I think what we're all doing. We're sort of like Severance. We're breaking them down into little pieces and trying to understand that side of them to express that feeling to you.
I'm so character driven.
Right.
Like for everything I've done, it's never just been makeup. And I do effects because I'm a department head. So like you have to know how to do all kinds of stuff and whatever the script calls for. So making sure that your skill set is vast and practicing all kinds of makeups, like not just monster makeup, sometimes beauty makeup, sometimes editorial. Editorial is different than a traditional beauty. Like there's so many different aspects. So just doing something every day, I think, and showing up for yourself is huge, because if you have to be the biggest motivator
Right.
in your life,
That part.
if you don't show up for yourself, like how do you expect to show up for other people, So, but it's just being consistent, I think, is really important. And understanding, who you are, what the script, especially we're script driven. So like what the script says, what the world says, and figuring out who these people are, and does your part make sense in the world that we're creating?
That's some really good advice. I hope you're writing all this down, you guys, or at least recording it. Michael, what do you have to add?
Yeah, I think all great answers so far, and I think just piggybacking on that is, just absorbing as much as you can, and like, I'm always trying to like watch new things, listen to new music I'm not familiar with, and just really trying to like broaden my horizons. And I think as a creator, like we're called to do that, and like each project has its own set of challenges or own set of references or influences, and like you never know what you're going to get asked to do.
Right.
And seemingly disparate things come together in really interesting and weird ways, and I think that's where the excitement is, because it's film, the medium, like there's so many collaborators and so many cool ideas swimming around, and it becomes this like cool synthesis of all of that. And I think that's musically, like to do that by just listening to as many different types of music as I can, and going to shows and the concerts, and just really living and breathing it, because it's everywhere, and like with Agatha, it's like I listened to Blackpink, and like you wouldn't think Blackpink, Explosions in the Sky, like one of my favorite bands growing up, and like that somehow like finds its way in there. But I'm also listening to John Cage and Razor, like some weird classical, like sort of avant-garde stuff, and Just you never know like how all those things come together. Sure, that's the fun part of it.
I agreed with everything that was said. Study, practice, do the work, listen to lots of music. And as a composer, you want to bring your own voice to a project, but in filmmaking, it's all about collaboration. So just be ready to be open to the process of collaboration.
I'm looking for advice or advice for all directors on how to work with your team and how best to collaborate.
Ooh, that's a good question. Anybody have any immediate thoughts that jump to the forefront?
I think the whole thing is a collaboration process. And I think like in any relationship, there's a give and a take. And I think that's the thing. I think when we first start, we try to micromanage everything because, safety is in control, but beauty is in letting go. So it's like that's the balance that you're trying to find, like to really be able to let go. And I think I see that a lot with directors too, because it's really like what they're trying to get out of actors.
Right.
That
was a great answer. I'm saving that quote. Anybody else?
I think also like you have to trust your team. Oh, like you hired us for what we bring to the table, so sometimes you just have to trust us a little bit because we all know our departments so well. Everybody here knows their departments well, and it's hard to know everything about everything. So sometimes you do need our expertise in moments, and I think trusting us with what we know is really important.
I love that.
Yeah, I'll add to that too. In this current, state of the film industry, TV industry, is that we have a lot of guest directors. So, we're shooting the days of 22 episodes are pretty much gone. We're down to 10 episode things, right? And so we have a director for every each episode, and so that director has to depend on the departments that have worked before them, and so that they can prep and they don't get a lot of prep. They'll get 2 weeks, maybe, right? And just the way scripts come down. So it's really beneficial for a director guest director to say, okay, everyone knows their job. I can ask questions, but I don't have to micromanage anybody. And then you have success.
Right. Okay, guys, so unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. I want to thank our panelists, Carlos, Crispy, Chris A, Desiree, Michael, and Tim, for being here with us today and to discuss their creative work. Also, thank you to Impact 24 PR and, of course, WonderCon for putting this panel together, and for all of you guys for joining us.